got everybody here, may as well start. So, let's save this, and we have a visitor from Rotary Youth Exchange Program, is that correct, Ms. Carter? Not here, okay, well then, that'll go on later, so.
Yeah.
So someone's gonna talk to us about the liquor license report.
Yes, sir, if we could. Council is aware that you have a discussion coming up about the renewal as it pertains to liquor licenses, and that would be all categories. It's typical that a report is provided to you with regard to that decision-making process. We're trying to get on it a little earlier this year as it relates to the report itself, so that you can have time to consume it in preparation for that discussion. So what you have in front of you this evening is the first part of that report, which is the largest part of the report, to give you time to consume the data that's in here. We will be providing you a second half, if you will, much smaller piece as it relates to compliance checks and that sort of thing that the department is working on currently. If I could, Mr. Mayor, give a little time to Captain Schultz to walk us through and orient us to some of the elements of this report and answer any questions that we might have.
Question? The first part of that, I think the biggest bulk of the report here, it shows the demerit points. And generally, I was talking to Chief Solsberg about it, but what you're seeing out these demerit points is usually those demerit points are coming from the compliance checks that the police department does throughout the year to all the liquor license retail holders. There isn't, I don't see, off of what we have here, there isn't anything from any independent action or we've been called to any of the bars or liquor licenses holders to take any action. You can see there's a couple of them that are awaiting trial. One was dismissed, and I also have one that was just a warning instead of any citation or corrective action to liquor licensing. But with that, the small part that the city manager was talking about, we're trying to get together is that we've been crunching numbers with all of the compliance checks for the calendar year of 2018 and not just the grant period like 17-18 or 18-19. So I was going through all the data trying to figure out how many exactly compliance checks that we have completed through all the liquor licensees here in town, how many and what all the actions were taken out of those. That page there on 4, that's accurate for a calendar year. But there's other data I'm going to get together and put in a memo format to get to you guys about how many checks we've done in a calendar year, how many that they checked on businesses at the time they checked, they may not have been open, but yet it was still a business, or the business wasn't open for business and still holds a liquor license to the city. And if some of those businesses have been checked twice in that time frame.
Questions? Captain Schultz? Okay, thank you. I guess we set aside 15 minutes for that, so we're in good shape.
We'll get a schedule.
So we also need to talk about community promotions. Do you want to do an update on that?
If we could, Mr. Mayor, that'd be wonderful. We are hopeful that we can bring forward a formal recommendation for you to consider by virtue of a resolution next week pertaining to community promotions, but we didn't want to do that without giving you the opportunity to look at the final outcome with regard to the direction that you gave us last week. And so we tried to apply the mathematics to what you proposed from a policy standpoint to get you what you see in front of you tonight. My biggest question is whether or not you think those numbers are appropriate and reflective. If you think we missed something, please let us know and we'll correct it and get it back to you. But otherwise, we certainly stayed within the budget that you identified. We tried to, again, apply the parameters that you thought was appropriate. And I would just ask you to look at those numbers and see if you think it reflects your will.
uncertainty that you had to deal with putting this together, or was it pretty clear?
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, the direction was understood. Sometimes the direction that's given in the way that we translate it in terms of the mathematics and the actual application might come off a little different. So we didn't want to assume anything without you getting another chance to kind of eyeball it.
Give everybody a minute just to look at it and make sure. Okay? We all good? Okay. Bruce,
Appreciate that.
and you also wanted to talk about one of the consent items, I think.
Yes, sir. There's a change order in your consent agenda this evening that is a little unusual. For those of you who sit on the Regional Water Board, you might not find it as unusual as maybe your other colleagues on the council. But if it pleases the council, I'd like to turn some time over to Andrew to kind of walk through that change order as it relates to the wastewater treatment plant project, and more specifically the generator building. It has some odd results, albeit favorable, that I want you to be aware of as it relates to this change order. And so, if I could have Andrew.
Your Honor, Council Carter's right. If you're on the Regional Water Board, you just looked at a very similar change order to this one, I believe even just last month, for a large time extension. This one's over 400 days, and a deduct change order. In this case, it's $30,000 plus. A lot of give and take with the contractor and our consultant about the submittal process and the ability of the contractor to meet specifications, which were very detailed and very specific. That took a long time, and these things are not stuff that you go to Home Depot and just pull off the shelf. And it's a long lead time to actually get this generator manufactured and delivered and then therefore installed. But the net result is a deduct of $30,000 plus and a time extension of 400 plus days. So I'll be happy to answer any further questions.
It looked like it was related to some coatings.
A lot of it's related to the enclosure and the coatings, which was very similar to the issues we had with the generator at the water treatment plant.
Mr. Mayor, unlike most change orders, we are paying more. This is what we call a deductive change order, wherein we actually get money back. And so that's what I meant by favorable, because the time extension is not entirely favorable with regard to getting the project done in the initial time frame that we thought, but getting the money back does help.
Steve?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess my question is, the deduct, is that money coming back because of the fact they are having an extension of time, or are we saving money somewhere on the project?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I wouldn't call it a penalty necessarily, a deduct, but what would you phrase it?
That is a good question, Councilman. It's twofold. We are assessing them $21,000 in essentially what is LD, but there's another memo, well, it's the same memo, but a separate resolution where we're authorizing additional contract amendment to Arcadis because of their additional time and expenditures and costs associated with this delay. And there was also additional $10,000 plus an actual deduct for failure to meet the specifications. So it's a kind of a dual change order.
But the contractor really had no control over this, Andrew, right?
Your Honor, to a certain extent, but the contractor picks his supplier. So the contractor does have a little more control than you might think, but the specifications were very detailed, and I don't think any manufacturer could meet them 100% regardless.
Any other questions for Andrew on this? Okay.
Thank you. And I understand that Councilman Pacheco hates change orders.
Well, we needed just somebody to step up.
Let's just give them money back. Would Dallas have loved to see?
Do that in honor of Dallas.
We got money back. Since we're talking about consent agenda items, one of the things Carter and I talked about is sometimes we do have things on consent where even if you're following things pretty closely, you're kind of scratching your head saying, what is that again? And so I'm going to be asking Carter at the front end of the consent list to see if there's any items that really should just have a sentence or two to kind of explain what they're about or why they're coming before us, since we don't have have a way to discuss consent items unless we wanna talk about them after we pass them, so, so I think that might be helpful, just to kinda stop and say, is there anything you think people should know about these? And then we might just pick one or two that might be questionable, so. I see our guest is here. You must be Miami.
Yes, I am.
So, welcome to our council meeting, and, would you like to get up and tell us a little bit about yourself and how Casper's treating you and?
Oh, well, I brought Fran.
Okay.
He's-
Oh, excuse me, I had that messed up, so, okay.
Yeah, it's not about me. So I have Fran DeLuca. He's an exchange student through the Rotary at Casper that I'm with. He's 16 years old, from Argentina. He's big into politics, so I thought it'd be fun for him to come and meet the council, and then sit in on the session for a little bit. See how our city looks.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Casper.
Thank you, thanks for having me here today.
So who really owns the Falkland Islands?
Okay.
No for a question.
No comments.
You can be a politician.
If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to
Sure.
Fran.
I'm Charlie Powell, the mayor.
I'm Sean Johnson.
Steve Friel?
Mike Huber,
Ray Pacheco.
Bob Hopkins.
Chris Walsh.
Kristen Lutz.
Ken Bates. I'm Carter Napier.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So if you want to have an exciting evening, just stick around. And we've got a council meeting right after this. And they're usually riveting.
Okay.
Fun going.
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
You a
Thank
skier?
Huh?
You a skier?
I
All right.
I became a skier.
Oh, good for you.
Got it.
All right. Well, again, welcome.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Go sit now.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we've got pretty much everything. Oh, amendments on the dog ordinance, yes, that's the next item.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think there were a couple amendments that were suggested by members of your council last week, and the attorney's office has been working in concert with Councilman Walsh, I think, with regard to at least some of these, and I think some others have been proposed for council's consideration that obviously could be brought up this evening and considered on the floor, so. Chris?
Yeah, you've got the handout, the one that says Walsh's proposed amendment. If you take a look at it on the First Amendment, it is directly relating to page 2 of the private property. And the amendment, of course, at the top is wordsmith in the amendment itself. It will look like that paragraph right below it. If it is on the owner's property and not under the direct supervision of the owner, or not confined to the extent that the animal cannot leave, so that not under direct supervision of the owner is the clause. And then a second amendment to add a definition for direct supervision. So that one's mine, and then we've got one from Ken, and the judge might have something to add on these as well. My intent is that you can play ball with your dog in your own yard, in the front yard. You have to be there. You can't turn it out. If you turn it out, you're not supervising your dog.
Can't look out the window every once in a while.
Right. You're out there playing with your dog, or doing whatever, gardening, that kind of thing, but they're under your direct supervision. Nothing precludes that from becoming at large as soon as it leaves private property. Nothing protects it from any of the penalties or anything else that are in place if it goes off the property, causes a negative engagement, so.
So Ken, how do you feel about these changes relative to your amendment?
I don't have I think it's fine. Mine was more of my amendment was more of the owners that have the dogs under direct supervision, as everybody said, you know, my dog's a good dog, he won't. Mine was more of less the dogs that aren't staying on the property, even under direct supervision, that was off to sniff another dog, look at a baby, whatever, and is considered to be a nuisance or at large. Instead of finding them a certain amount of money, that they are fined from then on to they have to, for up to a year or whatever, tether or put up a fence.
To take,
Is what
take-
mine
to
is
take
more
their
about.
right to have direct supervision in lieu of.
Correct, because that way the dog owners that the dogs truly stay on the property, we're not messing with them, but the ones that the dogs are choosing, that they say, oh yeah, they'll stay while I'm guarding, and they run off to go meet that other dog off the property. You know what? They went off the property. They're not under direct supervision or under that control because they went. I think they do need to have a, sorry, you blew it,
So
I guess is what I'm saying.
So Metro would have to maintain some kind of database then, I assume.
Correct.
How feasible do you think that would be, Carter?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think that could be an entry in Spillman that would help staff keep up with those kinds of issues.
Do you want to discuss this now while we have a chance?
Did you have another?
Well, just kind of briefly, I think that what most all of us agree on is that we want to provide for that if the person's out there in their yard, they can have the dog right there with them and be playing with them and that kind of thing. I can live with Chris's proposed amendment. What I had come up with would be to just add another phrase onto the existing part of subpart B that would just add the language and say, unless said animal is in the immediate physical presence of the owner and under the direct and immediate control of the owner, in the definition of at large. I don't know, John, Mr. Henley, if do you have an opinion which language you think is more clear? Because what we get into is that if we have, this is a criminal statute, and any criminal statute, and if there's any ambiguity in it, the ambiguity will automatically be resolved in favor of the defendant and against the city. So I want to have it as clear as it can be, unless if we want to on purpose make it ambiguous. But and I don't know, John, if you have a feeling which you think is clear or whatever. I can live with Chris's thing, or if people like my language better, doesn't matter that much to me.
Yeah, I know that the last session we had, the council discussed extensively how to have direct supervision, but not make it to the point that the dog had to be right at your heels all of the time. He had to be in the same area. So we tried to define it by geographic and the ability to call the dog and manage the dog. And that would be Councilman Walters, which I drafted, so I probably have a little bit of a bias that way. With respect to the one that you had proposed, the only problem I had with that would be that you used the word control, and control is defined in the definitions, and it's defined as either being under tether or in a confinement. So that would create an ambiguity.
That would be a
But you
problem.
could use some alternative words again, whether it's be manage or the ability to call the dog back, something like that.
I can probably live with Chris's thing, unless somebody in there points out some deficiency or something.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody here. How about Ken's suggestion? To maintain a list of people who have not adequately supervised their dogs, and they would then lose their privilege to basically play with the dog in the front yard. Or should we just stick with the current
Well,
sanctions?
in the current one, we've got, that first time isn't you're gonna have to develop a pattern of behavior, where that exact thing happens. Basically, you register your address and location when you move those around. And, leaving the property in either of these doesn't grant any immunity from being at large. So I think we cover it in the other one.
Rather than basically remove a privilege for a period of time. Go ahead, Chuck.
I just want to say that I agree with Councilman Walsh's amendment. I think it covers what the intent that we have anyway.
Any other comments? All right, now, we also received some emails again pointing out what some perceive as a vagueness in the proper care of an animal outside and what are safe conditions. And there was some alternative language suggested that the dog is not outside during a period of extreme weather, including without limitations, extreme heat or nearing freezing temperatures, thunderstorms, tornadoes, which is a little more descriptive than what we currently have.
Not all of the United States.
Just want to see if anybody was persuaded by those emails to, Chris?
Well, I don't know what we've all gotten, but one of them included food and water. So we have that under cruelty. No person shall fail to provide sufficient good and wholesome food and clean water, proper shelter, and protected from the weather, including sunlight, veterinary care when needed, prevent suffering with humane care and treatment.
Line 698, is that right?
698, yep. And then you go into cruelty to animals. 804, an enforcement officer may remove shelter and care for any animal found to be cruelly exposed to the weather, starved, or denied adequate water, neglected, abandoned, or otherwise treated in a cruel manner, shall deliver such to the animal shelter. So I think those leave open, you can take into consideration the different breeds, the different conditions, the different shelters. If we structure that for specific temperatures, well, we're assuming a lot.
So a metro officer, if a neighbor complained that a chihuahua was outside and it was 10 degrees out, a metro officer would be able to go and say, you're in violation.
Absolutely, and if that chihuahua was in a yard with a husky, it would say in violation because of that one, because this dude's driving.
And you would agree, Mr. Henley, that we would be able to prosecute under those conditions?
Yes, sir, just
This
need to make your
language?
case, and the animal control officer could testify, the neighbor could testify. So, we just need to have the evidence.
Maybe the Huskies there to provide shelter for them.
Okay. Anything else on the dog ordinance before we go out?
I do. I think we all got the email from Mr. Andrew sent about the dogs in the cemetery, and the original ordinance he proposed that it was there to keep dogs from peeing or crapping on any headstones or on the burial or anything of that nature. So he mentioned keeping it as it was or going back to what it was. So I see his point, I guess, on it, that, you know, your dogs are going to be allowed in the cemetery. We have problems with people cleaning up poop, just walking them on the sidewalk. I am still in favor for dogs to be in the cemetery, but he did bring up a good point that I know my dad's buried there, and some of his kids are buried there, my mom's kids are buried there, that if I walked up and I saw a dog crap on their headstone, yeah, it's just a headstone, but sorry, that torqued me off.
I wonder if we could have Mr. Leba just kind of monitor this and ask his staff to see if that's actually happening, maybe give us a report in 3 months or so, and, after the the weather changes and people are in the cemetery more often. See if it's a real problem or imaginary problem, because I responded and I said, you're probably right, that's probably exactly why that's in there. And, but also they're gonna be on a leash, and so, why don't we see if it develops into a problem?
I agree.
Is that okay? It's gonna, Bob?
Yeah, just a question on one of our consent items regarding the Zamboni. I assume that Zamboni is not completely written off, so will that be transferred at the remaining asset value to DD8? Because it's only 4 years old.
Mr. Councilman, Mr. Mayor, I would say that's correct.
Okay.
Got 1 cent of public money.
I saw the ad.
They did say that, didn't they? Yeah, that's right.
Well, okay. Carter and I have started working on planning for the, what are we calling it, strategic planning meeting? And so we still have to land on a date. And, but we're working on coming up with a, and Chris was the one who made the suggestion. So following up on Chris's suggestion, the plan is to give you all some questions to respond to so that we can kind of jumpstart this thing, and when we do get together, we'll be halfway home, and maybe we won't even need 3 hours. So we'll see if we can, if everyone can, you know, take the time to go through that ahead of time. So when, let's see, you were gonna get a draft in by next week, is that the idea?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we hope to get you a draft this week and have a council goals packet ready for distribution on Tuesday.
So Chris, we were just talking about the strategic planning meeting and your idea of sending some stuff out ahead of time. So I think we're gonna go ahead and do that.
Any of those days proposed are fine with me too.
Oh, okay, good.
My preference is Monday, but
No problem.
Okay, well, that's the last thing we needed to set it, so we'll get it set in the next couple of days.
It looks like, Mr. Mayor, the 25th would be the magic day then.
Okay?
we gotta
I think
make
we got what's that?
Is that the Monday?
That's the Monday, yep. That's the Monday.
Okay? 3 weeks following this.
Yes, sir.
Okay? All right. Sounds good. And, oh, I'll just mention this since we just have a minute. Did you get my email about this? Information matrix? They're doing a, this group is, Lawrence Fishburne is, is working on some documentaries. And I don't know if we're on a short list or if they're sent this out as a blanket, but they basically said they're interested in identifying Casper as a possible city to be featured in these broadcast segments to, entitled Communities on the Rise. So that sounds like us, right? So, if you guys are okay with this, I'll just learn a little more about it and see if it's something. It could be something that we get our name out and have Casper be a little more in the national conversation. So,
I'm willing to check into it more, but it could also be a hijacking. Here's communities on the rise, and look what Casper's doing. I mean, I just used to get those when I was at the police department.
oh really?
And about half the time they were negative shots.
Oh, really?
To be counterpoints, so.
Okay. Do a little homework on it first. Okay. All right. And just one more thing. Well, I guess we're going to talk next week about planning future work sessions, but since we did talk about the generator project, at some point I think it would be good for us to get a little update on how things are looking with the Hobbs plant and its gradual evolution and how we're, kind of the long-term capital construction plan that we have for that wastewater treatment plant, because it's going to become, well, it's already important, but more and more important as we kind of deal with the fact that it's a 1950s facility. So. Okay, anything else? Agenda review, kind of didn't get to that. It's pretty but there's really no changes from what we have been sending out, right?
No,
So,
I don't think so, Mr. Mayor. And actually, with the couple questions that we asked tonight with regard to the amendments and everything else, I think we covered gender review pretty well.
And just so you're all aware, I'm reaching out to our friends in Sheridan who've had some similar experiences with liquor license changes. And I also plan to reach out to Cheyenne as well, because they have also been doing something somewhat similar to what's being proposed. And I'm not so much interested in hearing from the people who put it in place, but in the people who have been affected by it, and see what they say. So, okay. Work. Well, Ken has offered to cover the Historic Preservation Committee and CADA. We still have a couple others.
Well, the historic preservation
I now call the February 5th, 2019 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your yes switch?
All council members are present.
And just a reminder that our meetings are televised on cable channel 192. Could I get a volunteer to come to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? A brave soul.
All right, good on you.
Mr. Boren, good evening.
What a great opportunity.
Okay.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Bourne. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the January 22nd, 2019 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on January 29th, 2019.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the February 5th, 2019 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So move.
Second.
Second, moved by Councilman Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Pacheco. Any abstentions? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. Exposure to different cultures ranks as one of the most powerful ways to promote international understanding and peace. The Rotary Youth Exchange Program, which started in the 1920s, provides thousands of young students with the opportunity to meet people from other countries and to experience new cultures, planting the seeds for a lifetime of international understanding. The Rotary Youth Exchange Program offers numerous benefits to its young participants and their Rotarian hosts and mentors, as well as to the community at large. Immersion in another country's educational system, government, and social customs enriches the lives of the student, the host families, and the entire community. The City of Casper is indeed fortunate to enjoy the benefits of the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. And could we invite Francisco DeLuca forward, please? And I'm supposed to have a certificate. Is that up here somewhere? Blue envelope, huh?
In your stack there, probably.
Ah, right here. This is it. Here it is. I'd like to give Francisco this Certificate of Achievement and Appreciation, which reads, to Rotary Exchange Student 2018-2019, Fran DeLuca. Your interest in our local government will contribute toward international understanding, which can help to prevent conflict and bring peace into our world. Thank you for sharing goodwill from your home country of Argentina with the citizens of Casper, Wyoming. The Casper City Council extends our sincere appreciation. Dated February 5th, 2019, signed by Charles Powell, Mayor of Casper. You're welcome. As a personal note, we hosted one of these exchange students quite a few years ago. He had the pleasure of being in our house when our house was set on fire by one of my sons. And it's probably the story that he tells most often when he talks about Casper, Wyoming. But I can tell you from that experience that that young man will speak highly of our community and our country for the rest of his lives because of how this community opened its arms to him and how well he was treated. And I suspect that that has happened over and over and over again with no real way of measuring the impact, but we know that this is a very good thing for all of us. So thank you again for being part of our community, Fran. This evening, we will be receiving an update on the Wyoming Reads and utilization of 1-cent funds for this program. And I'd like to welcome Dale Boren, who led us in the pledge, Tanya Sutherland, and Lisa Scroggins, and invite them to share with us about this excellent program. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you so much. First, I would like to say you have this listed as a bright spot in your both Fran and then our presentation as a bright spot in your meeting, and we thank you for that. But one point of clarification, we are here to share with you an update for the We Read program. We agree that Wyoming Reads is also a great bright spot for this community, but that's a separate program.
Oh, excuse us.
That's fine.
I didn't write this, though.
That's fine. That is not a problem. Wyoming Reads is an amazing program, but We Reads is what we're here to talk about. So I just want to begin by thanking you for the time in your schedule for us to come and give you an update on the program, and thank you sincerely for the financial support of We Reads. So I'd like to introduce, you've already mentioned, but so I'm Lisa Scroggins. I'm the Executive Director of the Natrona County Public Library, and with me is Dale Boren, as you know, the publisher of Casper Star-Tribune, and Tanya Sutherland, who is the Community Relations for the Natrona County School District. And we want to share with you what we're going to call our highlights reel from the We Read program. We are the three of us, we're really excited about this program and the impact that it has on our children and their future in the community. And we could go on and on and on about how great this program is, but for your benefit, we are not going to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Dale, and he's going to share a little of the history and the story of We Read.
Thanks again for letting us in the door. The City Council awarded We Read excess 1-cent funds 4 years ago, and we thought it was best to explain how we've used those funds, because it was a great deal of money, and we think we've done a great deal of good. In 2010, there was a school board meeting where it was discussed why, the question was asked, why is our graduation rate so low? It was almost 3 out of 10 didn't graduate from high school at that point in time. And the answer was, the question was, what is the best indicator a student will graduate? And the answer was that they're doing well in 9th grade. So we asked, what is the best indicator that a student will be doing well in 9th grade? And the answer was that they're reading at grade level at the end of 3rd grade. The library was in this meeting. Of course, Steve Dagenfelder from the school board was in the meeting, and the Star Tribune was in the meeting. And we talked about this problem after the meeting, and it became a point where we felt we could collaborate on trying to solve a community problem. And a collaboration between a public and private is not often a success, but this has been a tremendous success, probably because we all have a shared goal, but we also, none of us are taking a dollar out of this for ourselves. Our employees, if it's appropriate, they volunteer. If it's not, the entity has worked it into their schedule so that it gets done as a collaboration. We had simple goals. The one goal is to make sure that all students can read at grade level at the end of 3rd grade. And the second goal, as part and parcel of that, was to try to make literacy a community value. We undertook a 3-prong approach, and as part of that, we decided we wanted to raise the money to give a book such as these that I have. Here you have Splat the Cat, and a 3rd grade chapter book, and a 2nd grade chapter book. We wanted to give a book that was a pretty good quality book to every kindergarten through 3rd grader every month of the year, including summer, so that they had a book to read. Now, in some houses, these books are just another book. In some houses, this is the only book that child has. And we've had instances where kids have brought their book back to school, and the teacher would say, no, Dale, that's your book. And the student related to the teacher that they didn't want to leave the book at home because they didn't want their mom to sell it. So this became a really important part of our program. The second part was we did a weekly reader, and we have some of these for you to look at. But these weekly readers start with pre-reading, so preschool, shapes of letters, sounds, colors, that kind of thing. And it goes through all the various levels of reading up until you're reading a serialized story. And there's a lot of literacy intended for this that is designed by the Star Tribune produces it, the library produces the early reading stuff, the experts at the school district do some of the long-term reading skills that are represented in this. We've done more than 450 of these in the period of time that we've been doing We Read. It's been a massive project. The number of books we've given away, more than 450,000 books have been given to Natrona County students since 2010. Pretty remarkable. And so, you know, we just wanted to let you know what we've been doing. Oh, and the third prong that I mentioned, we had 3 prongs. The third prong was marketing. So that if people in Casper knew kids that were reading or struggling to read, that they discussed reading with them. We've done billboards, we've done, of course, newspaper, we've done television, we've done radio, we've done cable, we've done movie theaters. And I swear, if 2 people opened a can of tuna fish in the early years of this, we try to get on the agenda to talk about this program. We've appeared at almost every service club, and our request to the service clubs was not, aren't we great? Our request was, if you know a kid in this age group, ask them what book they're reading, because it's the adults that are interested in what the kids are doing. It's the adults that show that interest that are going to have a tremendous impact on these kids. And we think that we have had that impact, and we certainly appreciate your support. And so we thought we would talk a little bit about each of these individual prongs, and here is Tanya Sutherland from the school district.
Good evening. I think Dale pretty much covered what I was going to cover, but I'll touch briefly on it. So approximately 10 years ago, NCSD launched a priority focus on literacy efforts, particularly in the early elementary school grades. As Dale mentioned, multiple studies indicate the number of third graders reading at or above grade level directly correlates with the success and percentage of high school graduates. Not coincidentally, around 10 years ago, the NCSD Board of Trustees established a strategic plan with a priority goal outlining an increase of the graduation rate at NCSD. Since that time, in conjunction with our increased literacy efforts, we have seen a district graduation rate on a steady uphill trajectory. Last year, Kelly Walsh saw an 83% graduation rate. This year, NCHS saw an 84% graduation rate. We know we still have work to do, but those are some small successes for the school district. Early elementary students enjoying reading and becoming proficient at reading is a district and a community priority, which is supported by the We Reads program. We Read distributes age-appropriate books to every K through 3rd grade student once a month to help grow their family's library at home and encourage reading. As Dale mentioned, since its launch, we have distributed approximately 450,000 books to Natrona County students. I think it would be hard-pressed for any of us who have kids in the school district not to find one of these books in our library at home. I know I have a whole stack of them. In addition, We Read has been working to get some of our high school students who have already been recipients of the books in their early elementary years back into the classroom at the elementary level with Platt, the pronghorn, our mascot, who will be working with those students and some high school students to come into the elementary schools and read with the younger kids and just share their love of literacy and what the We Read program has meant to them.
So in addition to books, Dale mentioned that another prong is the My Trib, the little magazine. That is a 12-page weekly magazine targeted for children, and it has an amazing variety of content. Dale mentioned that it has everything from educational games. It has vocabulary building and word searches and number games, and teaches numeracy as well as literacy, but it's done in such a way that the kids love it. In fact, our latest surveys, the kids tell us, of the surveyed parents, 51% say, I read My Trib with my kids at home. And that's powerful, reading together. And 90% of the kids say they actually enjoy that. But 100% of the kids say that getting the My Trib gives them an encouragement to become better readers, to work on their reading skills, and that is really exciting news for us and very powerful tool for the educators in the schools to be using and to the future outcome for these kiddos. So Dale mentioned that the Star Tribune distributes this, and so where do they distribute it? Well, it goes to every elementary school. It goes into the public library. It goes to the Boys and Girls Club. It goes to the YMCA. And then, of course, they distribute it with their Casper Journal, and it goes into the homes of families across town. And so the content is fun, it's engaging, and that's powerful for kids because they're a tough act to sell to. They have to be engaged to benefit it all. So now Dale's going to share about marketing.
As you'll see in the presentation that we just handed out, there's a lot of research that has gone into this because as we've gone through these years, we kind of decided, well, are we doing the right things? I mean, because maybe the My Trib isn't getting read, or maybe the website isn't being read. And so we did we've done a survey every year of parents, teachers, and students. And 3 years ago, we did a survey. We did focus groups with a variety of people, from early childhood experts to, we talked to Casper police officers, we talked to retail merchants, we talked to schools, we talked to just anybody, combinations of principals, teachers, students. And we decided that about 8% of the students in the district were not being read to at home. And our question was, how do we reach that 8%? Because that's really what we're talking about here, is those kids that aren't being read to at home. And we decided that, well, what the police told us and the merchants told us was that it was a cell phone. That if they had interaction with people, you know, the parent would come and they'd say, well, Johnny, play a couple games while I talk to teacher. And so we paid for and developed an app that is called We Read, Free Games for Kids. It's available for free in iOS or in Android. And it's 50 games in each of the K through 3 age groups that you can play that are literacy oriented. In addition to that, then, and so this is what we're marketing this year, and the kind of the cool thing about this is that it's engineered so that high school students can create more games for it. So guess who our partner at the school district is helping us with engineering more games for this app. And I think then the last thing that I want to share with you is that we have also got a new mascot, because we think that kids, when it's fun, they'll buy in and they'll identify with it. And so I'm here to introduce to you tonight, for the very first public appearance, our mascot, Platt, the pronghorn.
All right.
Platt doesn't talk, he reads. And if he were to read, he would tell you that if you can't read, you can't succeed. So we think that this is really important work, and we so sincerely appreciate the support that we've gotten from the City Council and the county commissioners, and so we just wish to say thank you.
Right. Questions or comments from council? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can tell you that this program is great. My wife, being a career teacher, understands that the kids have to be able to read at 3rd grade. And the more they read, the better it works. And we have used this program when the kids come to visit. They play here and they go to the library about twice a week when they're here during the summer, and we were there during Christmas. So we appreciate what you do.
Councilman Lutz.
I have a kindergartner, so we read the newspaper insert every single week. We read the books multiple times when they come home once a month. And every time I let my kids play on my phone, it's that app.
Yeah.
So I thank you a lot.
Cool. Councilman Bates.
If I heard you right, you said 51% of parents are reading reading to their kids.
So that would be 51% of the parents that participated in our survey. So we track the success of our program and guide our program through the surveys that we conduct, and we do that annually, I believe it's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's 51% of the parents who responded to the survey.
That is still awesome.
That
is
awesome.
fantastic. So, thank you.
My only comment is I take a little issue with Ms. Sutherland's comment that moving the graduation rate from 70% to 84% is a small change. It is not. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 kids graduating that perhaps wouldn't have. We won't know how much your program had to do with that, but I'm sure it was significant. And whatever we're doing, let's keep it up. What could be more important?
Our first 3rd grader is going to graduate, will walk across the stage next year. Not
Cool.
this year, but next year. Can I say one more thing, and that is, and I know that Steve Hopkins wanted to be here, but he, of course, had business in Cheyenne. The thing that he always says that sticks with me, and I'm sure it'll resonate with you, is imagine where you would be, imagine where you are because you can read. But more importantly, imagine where you would be if you couldn't.
Important words. Any other comments? Thank you all for coming and stating the obvious. What could be more important than what you're doing?
Well, again, thank you for your support. We greatly appreciate it.
We'll leave.
And thanks for bringing Platt. It's Platt, not Platypus, the other mascot we have. Okay. Now is the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. And please state your name and address. Please direct questions to me. Please avoid attacks at the council members. Good evening.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay.
Ken.
Okay. Hi, my name is Michelle Sabrowski. I live at 1639 Palomino in Barnum, but most of my living is in Casper because we have a bar and a bar and grill in Barnum. That's about it. And a church. So there's no living, can't do everything there. So most of my life is spent in Casper. My daughter spends a lot of time at the ice rink. Today we started the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And at the end of it, it says, "For liberty and justice for all." So I kind of wanted to read something to you. It says, liberty is freedom from restraint in a general sense and applicable to the body or to the will of mind. The body is at liberty when not confined. It also goes on to say that natural liberty consists of the power acting as one thinks fit without any restraint or control from the laws of nature. If a state of exemption from the control of others is from positive laws in the institutions of social life, this liberty is abridged. So basically, I wanted to address your potential alcohol ordinance specifically tonight because I don't drink. So I just want to get that out there. This has nothing to do with me, but I do think that it's infringement on personal liberty of other of homeowners and of business owners who have liquor licenses. I think that it is an infringement because I should not be held responsible for the actions of somebody else, regardless. We just spoke about books, and I brought this book that I'm reading to my kids right now. We homeschool, and this is what we're using for our civics curriculum at the moment. It's a very good book, and it's written for teenagers, but I'm reading it to my 10 and 12-year-old right now. We're going through it together. It's a very, very good book, Lessons from a Lemonade Stand, and it helps you understand what laws are just and what the different types of laws are and what's right and what's wrong with them. And it basically goes down with lemonade stand infractions in other states where it's illegal to sell a glass of lemonade to somebody without a permit. So I just wanted to basically let you guys know that I think you're going down a very dangerous, slippery slope here with some of these ordinances. And I think we should just let people live their lives. And if a crime is committed, you deal with the crime when it's committed, and you can't hold somebody else accountable for the crime somebody else commits. If somebody else hurts somebody, then that person's responsible for that, not the person whose couch they sat on while they were drinking an alcoholic beverage. If something bad happens in a bar because the guy whose name is on the liquor license is intoxicated and he couldn't stop it from happening, then that's between the people with the thing. And if the guy with the liquor license is involved in a brawl, well, he's accountable for that. But I think that some of the stuff you guys are looking at is kind of an intrusion on personal liberty. And I think we need to remember that. I mean, we start every meeting with the pledge, and we need to remember words have meanings. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so you're aware, if you haven't noticed, we are going to be discussing this again in our work session, and we will be tabling this evening. So.
Oh, great! I'm glad you're tabling it, and I hope it goes in the garbage and never comes back.
Those are also televised.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So. And I'm sorry, any questions for Ms. Zarowski? Zabrowski. Questions? Okay. Good evening.
Hi there. Jesse Morgan, 831 West 59th Street. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm here tonight to speak about the alcohol ordinance as a former council member and also just a concerned citizen. You know, I wasn't sure when that tabling motion was going to occur, so I didn't want to miss my opportunity to speak to you tonight. So I'm taking that opportunity now. And I'll start as a former council member. You know, last year we were presented with information that, you know, led us to believe we have a huge problem with alcohol-related arrests in our community, and they exceed 50% of those arrests. But when you look at the data from the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, it says otherwise. Nashona County in 2017, for instance, had the total number of arrests related to alcohol being 33%. And data sent to me from our chief of police in September showed our year-to-date alcohol-related arrests at 24%. So, you know, where are these headlines coming from that show it at half or 50% of all arrests? It's only when you pair that with an illegal substance such as meth, THC, heroin. And I imagine everybody in this audience that might have an occasion occasional beer, we're not doing meth at all. So to lump those together, I think is unfair and unfortunate, because when you do that, we're hit with these negative headlines that people read that shows, wow, we have a huge problem, and it's only a few hundred people that are driving these negative headlines. So people that might be on the fence of moving here, for instance, or might be on the fence of, hey, there's an opportunity zone in Natrona County, what's going on there? They read these headlines, and it looks bad on our part, and we just branded our entire city, our entire community with this negative image that isn't even taking place. So I think that's unfortunate when, those people or investors are looking at other places like Sheridan, Buffalo, or even Cheyenne, for that matter, that was just awarded a huge convention center. So just be mindful of when you're talking about a legal beverage that's out there as opposed to an illegal substance such as heroin or meth. Next, our December work session, we were also led to believe that the chief had the support of our liquor dealers, and our former mayor, Councilman Pacheco, went as far as to say that we were in support of what the chief was proposing, because the liquor dealers were very much in support of this proposal, and we now know otherwise. So I hope that anytime that we're talking to the private industry, that we try to form a partnership, and that's my proposal tonight, is that you form a partnership with the liquor dealers. It's going to take time, money, and effort, and other people can share that burden, such as the Liquor Dealers Association, or even your municipal judge, for that matter. Somebody convicted of a DUI, if she found it to be appropriate or warranted, they could speak on just a public service announcement of how that negatively impacted their life, and what kind of message would that have for somebody that was consuming alcohol at their home or at a bar. Maybe they'll think twice before getting in that vehicle. I'd also like to go on further to let you know that there's a lot of liquor dealers in our community that want to have an impact, that want to work with the chief of police, and they do find value in the overconsumption seminar that he puts on for their employees. So I think he should continue in that direction, and think about the headline or the missed opportunity that we had, that we could have put out there, that CPD partners with liquor dealers to drive down DUIs. Kind of progressive idea does that show everybody beyond our city limits of what we're trying to do to make our community a better place? Now, as a concerned citizen, I just wanted to request that you consider making an amendment to the special malt beverage permit by removing a commercial kitchen requirement from that. It's not required by state law. It's required by local law, and I don't believe it should be required by local law. And if you were able to do that, a public auditorium or a stage that comes to mind is our Brian Scott Gamroth stage at David Street Station, or even our band shelter at Washington Park, for example, and reputable organizations such as the DDA, I haven't spoken to them, or Wyoming Symphony Orchestra could take advantage of that, as there's only a limited amount of permits that are given throughout the year. And that's mainly all I have. Thank you for, of course, serving on this board. I know it takes a lot of time, and I appreciate you changing the animal control ordinance just really quickly for that. So I'll take any questions. And I also have data from the Wyoming Associations of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, if you're interested. I can share that with you now. And the 2018 data should be available in March.
Thank you. Questions for former Councilman Morgan?
Can we get the
Yes.
handouts, or is it?
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is anyone else here to speak on the liquor license ordinance this evening? Okay. We're planning to table this evening, and we have a work session next week, and then have the second reading assuming that the motion to postpone is passed, we would actually have our second reading and public hearing 2 weeks from today. Am I correct on that? Okay. So, if you'd like to speak, sir, feel free. Anyone else that would like to come forward this evening? Please read the consent agenda title.
Established February 19th, 2019 as the public hearing date for consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 10.60 of the Casper Municipal Code, abandoned vehicles.
Chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing date just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Friel. Please cast your vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the speed zones near the Wyoming Medical Center. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
We have one exhibit tonight, Mayor. Exhibit number 1 is correspondence from Andrew Beamer to J. Carter Napier dated January 4, 2019.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Council will recall that a number of weeks ago, we had a citizen come forward who suggested that we consider changing the speed zone around the campus of Wyoming Medical Center. Pursuant to council's direction to look further, we did a warrant study that analyzed a number of factors that might contribute to a necessity to change the speed zone in the subject area. Upon reviewing that information, it was determined that crash data was fairly high. While speeds may not be necessarily excessive, the crash data consistent with the amount of pedestrians and ambulance activity in the area did warrant, in our opinion, a consideration for a change in the speed zone around the campus from 30 miles per hour to 20. The proposal that's in front of you this evening is to do just that. We suggest a change in the ordinance that would reduce the speed zone from 30 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour. And the ordinance you have in front of you after 3 readings, if you approve, would put that into effect.
And if you could just clarify, what would be the length of that speed limit change on 2nd Street then, Mr. Napier?
The speed zone would be effective for around the campus in particular, not just on 2nd Street, but to kind of circumnavigate the campus and go from there.
Okay, thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and please no duplication of speakers. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the speed zones to please approach the lectern. Anyone here to speak in favor of making this change? There being none to speak in favor, I now invite those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the speed zones, please approach the lectern. Anyone here to speak in opposition? There being no others to speak, no one to speak for or against the issues involving the speed zones, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance amending Section 10.24.010 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to 30-mile-per-hour speed zones near the Wyoming Medical Center.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Bates. Discussion. Councilman Friel.
Thank you, Your Honor. The only question that I really have on this is that we're dropping it from Conwell to McKinley down to 20, and then if I'm correct, we're going to pick it up 30 miles an hour again for approximately 3 blocks till we come down to Park, and then we're back into the downtown district at 20 again. It just seems silly to me that we're going to reduce our speed to pick up our speed to reduce it again within a 3-block radius. That's my only concern on that.
Other comments? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We spent some effort to synchronize the lights on 2nd Street, and we're going to be goofing with that synchronization a little bit for 2 blocks. And I just wonder if we might have staff or Carter supply us with effects of that, if it'll be a serious effect, or we can fix it by recalibration.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hopkins, that would be correct. We would have to adjust those lights accordingly to get that timing correct so that people aren't excessively stopped more than they need to be.
Right now, it's really working good. So
good.
But we have a centralized computer system now where that can all be done remotely, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Councilman Bates.
I just wanted to echo Mr. Friel, Councilman Friel, regarding that 3-block radius of going from 20 to 30 back to 20. I'd agree that I think it should just be 20 all the way through.
Mr. City Manager, would we want to, was that part of the discussion? Would there be some reason why we were doing this stair-step deal?
Mr. Mayor, we could certainly analyze that question a little further about making it from 20 from the hospital area into the downtown, if that's what's being proposed. I don't feel comfortable that the data is in place right now to say whether or not that makes any sense or whatever, or if it would cause traffic disturbances or whatever you want to suggest. But indeed, if we can take that question and do a little further analysis, we'd appreciate that opportunity.
How much time do you think you would need, since we're scheduled to have second reading in 2 weeks?
Mr. Mayor, I think we can have that analysis covered by the time we meet again for this issue in second reading. And if the question needs to be discussed further, I think we can take that analysis further for third reading as well.
Okay. Or discuss in a work session if it's problematic.
Sure thing.
Okay.
You bet.
Is that Councilman Walsh?
Right, the point's valid. I don't think that it matters what a traffic study says. We're talking 4 blocks. So we're going to say, slow down when you hit the downtown, slow down when you hit the hospital. Those are both very reasonable. And it's pedestrians, it's noise, it's all that kind of thing. And so the study would probably say that it's fine for 4 blocks to then speed up, but it's just doesn't make any sense. Regardless of, for me, regardless of what a study says, that 4-block stretch right there, we're going to spend more money signing it, re-signing it, and I kind of have trouble answering to anybody that says, why didn't you, why do you let people go faster there and slow down there? Because there's not an answer to it. We have an answer on why the ends of it are slow. The inside would fit with all the parameters to put it at a 30. It's just going to streamline the road if it's all the same speed.
For me, I just think it's a good practice to give staff an opportunity to give their reasoning before we make a change. That's just as a general rule. So there may not be a strong reason for why they proposed this way, but I would prefer that staff get a chance before we make the change. Councilman Walsh?
The staff is busy with all kinds of things, and the study will probably say that this stretch of road is eligible for a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Will we leave it that way? Or will we make them jump through hoops and then come back and say, well, we've decided that it doesn't make any sense anyway, so let's make it 20. I don't want to see them waste their time. Yeah, unless there's a compelling reason not to, but there really isn't. This is just a short section of road.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilman Friel and Walsh, and I think somebody else too. That, to me, it just doesn't make any sense to have it be like a yo-yo, because, that's what we had over on Collins, was it was 30-20, 30-20, and, frankly, I think that subjects the city to some criticism that, well, you're just setting up a little speed zone there so you can work the cash register and issue citations. Now, I know that we don't do that, but it sure looks that way. And I kind of have to agree with Councilman Walsh that, I'd just soon, and in fact, I would move to amend this.
Okay, let's finish our discussion and then, any other discussion on this? Amendments.
I'd move, okay.
I'll let the judge do it. I think he's more articulate in such things.
I move that we amend this the way that Councilman Walsh wanted it to be.
Second.
Moved by, motion by.
I mean to just make it a 20-mile-an-hour speed zone all the way from Conwell through the 2nd Street downtown district, wherever the 20-mile-an-hour zone ends on the west end of 2nd or West Yellowstone downtown.
Okay. Is that clear enough for you, Mr. Henley?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So the motion by Councilman Huber, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any discussion on the, I'm sorry?
As a point of clarification, maybe, we have that downtown designated area where that 20-mile-an-hour switches. I don't believe that's going to be consistent from Second and Kimball across to Fifth. So whatever that line looks like, could we adjust it to reflect that? And I may be wrong. It might be straight across Kimball, but I'm not sure.
I'm not following you, so is it, Councilman Friel?
I guess come back to your question, are you talking about expanding the entire area then, or, because the way I read, basically what I was getting at was around the campus, I agree with, McKinley over to Fifth up to Conwell, and then back down and around to make that block around the medical center there itself, and then extend Second Street from McKinley down to Park Street's where the 20-mile-per-hour in the downtown district picks up. So that would be the area that.
That's what I intended my motion, only to change the span on Second Street, not to change any of the other streets around the hospital.
Any other discussion on the amendment? I'll simply say that since I don't believe there's a compelling reason for the proposal the way that it is proposed, but there sometimes is that we can't see. I would like to make sure that staff looks at this, and if there is an argument for not making this amendment, that we give them an opportunity to do so before second reading. So, all in favor of the amendment offered by Councilman Huber? Cast your votes.
While voting aye, motion to amend passes.
Thank you. And now the vote on the ordinance itself. Pardon me?
As amended.
As amended, thank you. Any other discussion on it before we vote? Any other amendments? Please cast your vote.
With all members voting aye, motion ordinance as amended passes.
Democracy in action. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the zone change for a portion of the Wyoming Industrial Park addition. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Thank you, Mayor. We have one exhibit, exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated January 23, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What we have here tonight is a request for of a property owner, from a property owner, I should say, who would like to see a change in the zoning of his property, his or her property, with regard to future plans and the vacant property that exists conterminous with his existing structures and so on. The property was annexed into the community from the county, wherein an existing PUD came with the annexation. Consequently, additional requirements are necessary when indeed a PUD property is attempting to make some development changes and so on with regard to similar properties and applications. The proposal here is to change this PUD to an M1 zoning classification, which is a limited industrial classification, which, by the way, is consistent with the properties surrounding the subject area. Again, for the purposes of streamlining the development opportunities that this property owner would like to take advantage of. It should be noted that the Planning Commission did accept this proposal and supported it unanimously, and we suggest the same for the council to consider this evening.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers, please. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the zone change to please approach the lectern. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Bill Farringer with Civil Engineering Professionals at 6080 Enterprise Drive. I am here representing the owner who had to be out of town tonight. And the city manager explained it well, that this piece of property that he is trying to develop right now was currently zoned PUD, and it was just kind of a little island of PUD in the middle of the industrial zoning all the way around it. So the city staff recommended that he request this zone change when he came in with his development plan. And so the owner is in favor of this and would appreciate your vote. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions for Mr. Farringer? I just have one. If you could explain the history, so it's basically that this was part of the county is why it was part of the PUD. So there was a larger PUD outside of the city limits originally?
I believe that is correct, Mr. Mayor. This area here is just below where the county jail is at.
Oh, okay.
Back in the early 2000s or whatever, when all of that was being developed up there, that was all part of the county. And so it was zoned that way for the county, and then when it came into the city, it just carried that zoning with it.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in favor of the zoning change? There being no others to speak in favor, I now invite anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this zone change to please approach the lectern. Anyone here to speak in opposition? There being no others to speak in favor or in opposition, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving a zone change for lots 4 through 6, Block 19, Wyoming Industrial Park Addition subdivision in the city of Casper, Wyoming.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
Moved.
Second. Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Discussion. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote. Do we need to wait for him to return? Or we just go ahead? Okay.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the issuance of resort liquor license number 7. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 5 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Fleur Trimmel to J. Carter Napier dated January 10, 2019. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated January 28, 2019. Exhibit number 3, affidavit of website publication is published in the City of Casper's website dated January 10, 2019. Exhibit number 4, affidavit of notice of conspicuous posting pursuant to Wyoming Statute 12-4-104A as posted at 300 West F Street dated January 28, 2019. And exhibit number 5, liquor license application filed January 7, 2019.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have before you an opportunity to change the color, if you will, character of a liquor license here, resort liquor license. We've had a change in ownership from Havana Fund 1 to Havana Casper LLC, and accordingly, the ownership would require that council effectively transfer that license accordingly, and you'll see something real similar here in your next question as well.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak council will now listen to public comment. Public comments, again, are limited to 5 minutes. I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issuance of resort liquor license number 7 to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here to speak in favor? There being no one to speak in favor, I would now ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issuance of resort liquor license number 7 to please approach the lectern. There being no one to speak in favor or in opposition to this change, I now declare the public hearing closed. Chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, authorize the issuance of resort liquor license number 7.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Bates. Discussion. Amendments? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Hopkins.
I'm not sure we didn't change the name of that street, 300 West F Street, to Parkway Drive or something. So it's just a minor thing in the application, but I thought we changed the name of the street.
I don't recall that.
Well, it was part of the deal when we had somebody wanted to buy it. We were gonna put some improvements in. We put up a new sign, I think.
Are you talking about the Ramada or the Ramkota or the park, or the
I'm talking about the Parkway.
Parkway?
Let's cross the road.
This is the one by the river.
Oh, I'm on the wrong side. I'm on the wrong side. I'm sorry.
I always think it's me,
No,
but it was you this
I'm
time.
on the wrong side of the road.
Okay. Wrong side of the interstate, actually, so, okay. All right. So, okay. Threw me off. So, any other discussion? It's really, we're just changing a resort license to another resort license. Okay. Thank you. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the transfer of ownership of retail liquor license number 36. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 5 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Fleur Trummel to J. Carter Napier dated January 10, 2019. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated January 28, 2019. Exhibit number 3, affidavit of website publication is published on the City of Casper website dated January 10, 2019. Exhibit number 4, affidavit of notice of conspicuous posting pursuant to Wyoming Statute 12-4-104A is posted at 410 South Ash Street dated January 28, 2019, and exhibit number 5, liquor license application filed January 7, 2019.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're talking about the ownership of the liquor license for the Urban Bottle that most of you are familiar with. This particular ownership has changed in that a third partner has bought into this ownership. Even with that nuance of ownership being different, state statute requires that council take the effort to transfer ownership to a new entity, so to speak, and that is what's being requested of you this evening.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Again, public comments are limited to 5 minutes. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the transfer of ownership of retail liquor license number 36? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. John Griffith, 915 South Lincoln. I am one of the original owners of Urban Bottle, and as the city manager discussed, the verbiage of transfer is maybe a little bit misleading. At the end of the day, our 4 original owners of this still maintain the majority. We just did have another individual that wanted to become involved in our business. So as much as anything, obviously I support the transfer if that's what the state wants to call it, but I'm also up here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Griffith? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak here to speak in favor of the transfer of this liquor license? There being no others to speak in favor, is anyone here to speak in opposition of this license transfer? There being no one else to speak in favor or opposition, I now close the public hearing. And let's see, where am I? The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, authorize the transfer of ownership of retail liquor license number 36.
So moved.
Moved by Councilwoman Lutz, seconded by Councilman Bates. Discussion. I'll just say it's always good to have someone else who wants to invest in our downtown. So this is a good thing. Any other discussion? Amendments? Please cast your vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. Council will now discuss the ordinance for the Elkhorn Village Addition subdivision. This item will be open for public comment on and for discussion by council. And this is our 3rd reading, so we have had 2 previous readings on this matter. Chair would entertain a motion to approve on 3rd reading the ordinance just read. Oh, excuse me. Please read the ordinance on 3rd reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change for the Elkhorn Village Addition subdivision in the city of Casper, Wyoming.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on 3rd reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Friel. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Council, my bad. Council will now listen to public comment. Is anyone here to speak on this matter? Okay. Discussion amongst council. Amendments? Please cast your vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. Now to the matter I think people are here for. Now, council will now discuss the ordinance for animal care and control. This item will be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 6.04, Animal Care and Control of the Casper Municipal Code.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes, and please, no duplication of speakers. If someone does speak and you agree with what they said, you don't need to repeat it. You certainly may come to the lectern and say, my name is, and I agree with the comments of this previous speaker. Okay. Who would like to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening, council members and Mr. Mayor. My name is Sandra Materi, and I live at 1600 West Odell. I am here tonight to encourage council to reconsider adding an inclement weather ordinance. Casper experiences frigid temperatures during the winter months. There are many dog breeds that are not able to handle these temperatures. Many dogs freeze to death or suffer immensely during the winter. Leaving it up to owners to decide what their dog can and cannot handle is unacceptable. It would be ideal if all dog owners were responsible, but we all know this is not the case. There needs to be an ordinance in place for the irresponsible dog owners. The ones that think it's okay to leave a pit bull, Yorkie, Chihuahua, Whippet, or Greyhound outside with nothing more than a doghouse, and that's if they're lucky. The inclement weather ordinance that was presented to council simply states that the dog has access to a permanent structure. It does not state that the dog has to be inside. It simply gives them the option. An officer cannot properly address that an animal has insufficient shelter unless the inclement weather ordinance is in place. So again, please reconsider adding an inclement weather ordinance. Animals have no voice. We are their voice, and you are all in a position to end this needless suffering that so many dogs go through. In addition, I also would like to address the tethering ordinance. We are deeply concerned that the essential elements of the tethering ordinance were removed, and we would like to hear council's reason for removing these requirements at this time, if possible.
Questions for Ms. Materi? Okay. Thank you. Would someone else like to come forward?
They're all here in support, so
Okay.
instead of everybody repeating.
Would you like your names read into the record? It's not necessary.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Walsh.
If everyone's here on those two topics, I'd like to address them real quick. I was going to wait till everybody was done. Oftentimes when you look through these things, some parts are overlooked. And as far as the cruelly exposed to weather, and we've talked to the city attorney about it, did you see the clause on cruelty to animals where it talks about, forgive me if you've seen it, I'll read it just in case you haven't. Law enforcement officer, animal protection officer may remove, shelter, and care for any animal found to be cruelly exposed to the weather, starved, or denied adequate water, neglected, abandoned, or otherwise treated in a cruel manner, shall deliver it to the shelters. So my concern about putting specifics in it was those different circumstances. If you have an injured animal, it may not fit within the temperature ranges. If you have, you know, the double-coated dog, they can stay outside longer than the small toy dogs. So this leaves it to where those, whatever the element may be that's detrimental to that specific animal, the animal control officer doesn't have to say, okay, it was 35 degrees and they were out. They can say it was 40 degrees, it was in a puddle and not equipped to be able to handle itself. So that was why the specifics, there's the top end, the 60 degree in a car. The rest of it is based on the situation that it's in and the type of animal that it is. The other section that addresses that Also talks about food, water, and shelter, necessary vet care, and it has to be protected from the weather and to include sunlight. It seems broad. I think it covers more situations and a wider range of things that you might not be able to script perfectly. And on the tethering, there's the definition of tethering that's very short. And and then remember, of course you remember, the way the tethering used to be spelled out on very specifics on how the tether was, the length of the dog's body, that kind of thing. And the tethers, so a dog can't be tethered or with any structure that is not the dog owner's home except within the following conditions that are met. Has to be in visible range of the responsible party. It was 10 hours, now it's 2 hours. And has to be tethered in a manner to prevent injury and strangulation. That covers everything so that it's not going to get itself injured. Confine it to the property. It has to be on dry ground. It has to have water and shelter. Of course, no puppies, and no more than 2 hours for a 24-hour period. I agree with you that we don't want dogs chained to a cinder block. That's also going to fall under the cruelty provisions if you take the totality of the circumstances. And maybe my fellow council members, tethering a dog is when you tie them up. It's picture locking somebody into a room 10 hours a day without access to get around. I mean, do we want, lock yourself in the bathroom? You can lock yourself in the bathroom and eat and sleep and do natural business in there and never flush the toilet. It's a horrible thing to do. It causes territorialism, dangerous aggression. But I think that we can fully cover a cruel, the pit bull chained up to a cinder block, right? Unless you think specifically where we can't, under cruelty and under the provision where it talks about they've got to be tied up in a manner not to prevent, or in such a manner as to prevent injury. And then, you know, tethered is a well-fitted buckle-type collar or a body harness made of nylon leather not less than 1 inch or 1.5 inches in width, or 1 inch in width. So you.
What was the last, I'm sorry, what was the last one you just read?
If you look, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you're going to have the same one that I'm looking at, on line 718.
I don't have that. I wasn't able to access the city website today.
Okay, so it says,
That were removed, written down.
it says the tether is connected to the dog with a well-fitted buckle-type collar or a body harness made of nylon or leather not less than 1 inch in width. And the narrowness of the tether basically causes a growth. So you know, they get them embedded and that kind of thing. But if you get an embedded collar, it's also cruelty. And so it fits under that clause.
May I ask you a question?
We can be a little less formal with this. Go ahead.
So under cruelty,
Could you please get to the microphone, though?
the under cruelty, what you just addressed, has that changed from before we did the revisions? Or is that the same?
Since before revisions, yes, there's been evolutions in all of that. And then there's actually 2 sections of cruelty in there, or 2. You've got the definition, and then the regular cruelty to animal and intervention authorized as opposed to cruelty. Both of them cover it. Intervention authorized is where the officers can take action on it based on a wide range of, based on judgment. When they look at it, based on their background, their skill, knowing that, you know, one breed of animal is not the same as another breed of animal, and one can tolerate different circumstances than another, but there's a universal that they're not going to be stuck in a mud puddle and fed and soiled waste and stuck there for hours on end.
Only only problem I have with leaving it up to the officer's discretion is
Can't hear ya.
the officers have a different opinion.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I feel like certain officers have a different opinion than others do, so there needs to be a detailed ordinance for them to follow so that they're all following the same thing. We all have a different opinion of what breed can handle what.
And there have been issues in the past where people have complained that it's too cold for this dog, or this dog has inadequate shelter, and animal control has said it's okay. Like a barrel has been considered sufficient shelter. These are our concerns, that if it's not spelled out clearly,
It won't be enforced.
right.
Your Honor. I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Johnson.
I just want to say that I guess I have an issue with being too specific, because there's a lot of gray area when it comes to just life in general, and you can't cover everything with the extremely specific law. Officers have discretion on a multitude of things. You know, if you're going 31 and a 30, he could write you a ticket, or maybe not. They have discretion. So I think there's a lot of circumstances that will come into play, and I have confidence that they'll make the right judgment.
Other questions for these folks? Mine is, anything else you folks would like to say?
Can we review what you've, because I haven't seen this exactly as you've spoken, so we might review it and come back to you if possible.
Well, you can, because this is second reading.
Right,
Mr. Mayor?
and
Yes, Councilman Walsh.
In order to review what I'm looking at, if you look at our council packet that's posted on the website now, you'll have exactly the one that I'm referring to.
that's what we'd like to do.
Any other questions for these folks? Thank you for coming forward. I think we share the same concern that we want to make sure the animals are taken care of and are safe, and that there's some mechanisms that our animal caretakers can use to basically say this isn't okay and you need to change this, or we're going to take your dog. Okay. Discussion. Councilman Walsh.
Your Honor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me. My bad. Other public comment. I thought we had everybody up here, so sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deb Cheatham, 333 South Saconee. Good evening, all. It's nice to be back. As I was watching your last council meeting and discussing, first of all, I'm primarily in favor of this ordinance. I have a concern about the amendment that you adopted last 2 weeks ago on your first reading. I was quite surprised. There seemed to be very little discussion about whether or not dogs should be in cemeteries. And I was quite surprised to see that that was acceptable to you all. First of all, you have already 2 parks that allow dogs off leash, and you're planning, as I understand it, a third one, and that's fine. We also, in addition, have a number of other parks where you can take your dogs on leash, a lot of different green spaces. The cemetery is a fenced area, and while I know that dog owners always will tell you that they're very good about their dogs, you even last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever had a gentleman say, I know I'm supposed to have him on a leash down by the river, but I don't. So it is quite likely that you'll have dogs running free in the cemetery, which would be very disruptive, not just to, imagine trying to bury someone and have a dog run through. I mean, I can't even imagine the chaos that would cause. Dogs are also known to bite, and as you know, and that's the whole point of what you're doing is because of dog bites. And so it just seems to me there are thousands of people who, in this community, who have loved ones or family or friends buried up there. Both of my folks are up there. And I know that dog owners are supposed to clean up after their dogs. I also know that that's a big problem in this community, to the extent that you all are putting up billboards reminding people to clean up after their dogs. I would like you very much to reconsider and add the cemeteries back into a place, as a place where dogs just can't be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Cheatham? Councilman Bates?
Thank you for coming up and bringing that to our attention. And I got an email from Mr. Andrew, that same thing he pointed out. And my parents' children are buried there as well, little babies, when they lost them. So I see your point regarding worrying about dogs. I'd be ticked if some dog pooped on these headstones.
It's very disrespectful.
It would be. On the other side of the coin, I understand because one of the dogs I had, my mom really liked, and my kids like to take the dog up there, would like to take the dog up there because that was something that she loved as well. So it is that I did bring it to them, and I do believe our idea is to possibly keep the ordinance, but monitor it through the summer, and then if we find that it's an issue, then we can re-advise it. That's what we talked about, just give you guys, give you a heads up.
Any other questions for Ms. Cheatham? Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to speak on the dog ordinance? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Don Hinton, 1420 Kingsbury Drive. First of all, thank you guys for your service. I know the kind of hours this takes. And I'm like some of the other attendees, I was not able to access what I understand to be the current regulations. My concerns have been in the area of the declaration of incompetent ownership as to what would cause that, what are the benchmarks, et cetera. And I'll certainly try to avail myself by either coming into the office tomorrow to get a copy of whatever the current regs are, so that if there's something there, you know, I just in a overview of what I was able to see before the publication in the Tribune of the changes of the leash issues, which I do agree with, by the way. As a trainer, historically, there are a lot of ways to have a dog under very good control. And
I may stop you for just a second. We didn't make any changes to that section, did we?
The incompetent ownership issue?
Recently? Councilman
No,
Walsh?
not recently. And again, everything that we're working off of is in our council packet.
Okay.
That's where it'll always be current, but, I can tell you it's starting at about page 87 in the council packet on the internet. That'll show you.
I couldn't get that to come up clearly.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I
that's-
didn't think we had
that's
made
good to
changes
stay
to
on
that
that
section, so.
Could I just hear a quick overview of what the general points of guidance were on incompetent ownership, whether it was 3 strikes in X number of months or how many in a year? Just a very short encapsulation.
I don't know that anyone's in a position to do that right now.
Okay.
We'll make sure that we
I'll
do that
track
in our
down.
discussion.
My
okay?
concern would be that if it is tight and restrictive, you could sure get into some easy Hatfield and McCoy moments in a neighborhood. I know I currently don't own a dog. My mother does, 88-year-old, and it is her sidekick. He's a little morky, and last year there was a coon in the backyard, and he was all about it, and he would have definitely warranted a phone call. Somebody would have said, "What is going on with this dog over here?" And he was tried to save me from $7,000 worth of damage. He wasn't big enough to do that, though. And then shortly after, had a contractor next door, came over, worked on a joint fence point, and made an opening that little guy could get through. And in quick order, you might be in a spot where an 88-year-old gal is in violation. And I can tell you right now, because of the fact she spends upward of 40 hours a week, that's her only companion, we'd have a problem. And so I'm all about we don't have dogs biting people, that people feel safe in the community. I want dog owners to be able to be respected as well. to watch over those things. And I think we can sometimes delve, the lady who spoke earlier about freedoms, we can get a little down into the weeds, a little too restrictive on the ordinances, and forget about part of why we live in a place like Wyoming, why we live in Casper. And, you know, I know that other things that would have bothered me greater were the phone calls I placed about the backhoe that sat in front of my house for 18 months. And I would have preferred more action in that area than I would have on incompetent dog ownership. So I'll avail myself of the documents and see where I'm not up to speed and come back and visit with you again.
We do have a third reading. Questions for Mr. Hinton? Mr. Bates, Councilman Bates.
If you cannot access it or anybody else can't, I'm sure you can email one of us, but feel free to email me and I will email that ordinance to you, the most current ordinance, directly to you. So anybody that
And
wants
if I would just break away from my desk and walk the 2 blocks over to the office, which I did not do today, we'd all get caught up in work.
But as Councilman Walsh indicates,
appreciate that.
it is in our packet for tonight, which is on the city website.
Super. Yeah, I was there just before coming again and still couldn't get it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But thank you for your
Any other
assistance.
questions? Thank you, sir.
Your Honor.
Oh, sorry. Councilman Bates.
So you were asking about the reckless owner, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go on that packet, page 109, line 1043 is where it begins.
Okay, super. I'll get tied into that tomorrow. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Okay. Anyone else to discuss this? There's a familiar face. Good evening.
Good evening. Steve Cathy, 2141 Cornwall, Casper. Where does it stand as far as leashes in front yards that are not fenced? Do you have to have your dog on it or not? I have seen various things in the papers, yay, nay, it was amended, it wasn't amended.
Stay tuned.
Where does it stand right now?
I'm sorry, we're about to entertain an amendment after we move forward with this.
Okay,
So-
I am in favor of not having them on leashes in your front yard. So that was why I was here. I understand also that Councilman Huber was able to get a ski boot on. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
We'll see if our work on this will meet your expectations. Anyone else to speak on this matter? Good evening.
I am Molly George, 830 Trygood Drive. And I just want to echo Mr. Hinton's sentiments. I am in agreement with him.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Good evening, Mr. Steensland.
Thank you. Good evening, Dennis Steensland, 533 South Washington. Former Councilman Cathy, he doesn't want a leash. My opinion is, if a dog's out of the house, he needs to be on a leash. I don't know where this ordinance sits after all the changes or whatever. I don't have access to the computer stuff, so I can't keep track of this whole situation. My feeling is it's way too long and comprehensive. I don't think half of us know what the final product is. I've got a story with a dog on a leash or no leash, voice command. It has very long repercussions. Put me out of commission for 2 months. The dog was killed. The owner was deported to Mexico. So it's not a very light thing to deal with. But my feeling is if the dog's out of the house, anywhere, it needs to be on a leash. Voice command doesn't work. My situation, he was in a yard normally, gate was open. In a matter of seconds, a person was bit, and that was the outcome of that particular bite. But anyway, I don't know where you stand on your ordinance, but I hope it's something that's workable when you're done and enforceable. And I don't see that happening as of yet. So, thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Steensland? Was the owner present during this attack?
I would say he probably went inside for a cup of coffee. Whatever it was, he was in the house. The dog was normally in the yard. I didn't see the dog come out of the yard. I didn't know if he was out of the yard when I started walking down the alley. I do know it put me out of commission for 2 months. Like I say, the dog's name was Hitler. So anyway, Metro took care of it very well. I was happy with the way they handled it. But it just surprised me how long and elaborate a process it was. So I think it'll be much more cumbersome with this new ordinance. I don't know who understands the thing. So.
And just to state the obvious, sanctioning the owner at that point did nothing for you because you already suffered the injuries.
Right. I felt bad for him because he was deported. He had actually been here 10 years, had a job full-time, super nice guy, just had the wrong dog, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Steensland? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak on the dog ordinance? Okay. Where are we? Discussion. Councilman Walsh.
Well, I guess before discussion, shouldn't we move in second?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we?
We already did that.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we're on discussion now.
Just for everyone's, I don't know if it's peace of mind or not. So the ordinance has been proposed. And when we talk about the ordinance being a lot longer than it was, it's about the same size as the last one was. They include bees and chickens and dog shows and the whole works. Until there's conversation about an animal ordinance, there's only very few people that ever even look at them. And one of the things we're going to do, this was based on a public safety concern while we're doing that, address some of the other parts that needed to be modernized, if you will. But we've talked about having a quarterly review on this thing statistically to see is it effective and is it not effective. And if it's not, the idea isn't just to change it. If this doesn't work, it's not addressing the problems we have and we need to make a difference in it. So I plan on keeping an eye on that as best we can. And the reckless information, that concerns people. An accusation is not going to put somebody into a jam for a reckless dog owner. It's going to be a court conviction. So whoever brings that forward and whatever the nature of that is going to have to be convicted in a court with proper evidence and that kind of thing, and they'll have recourse on it through the court system. So it won't be at the decision of an animal control officer or a police officer or anybody, only court ordered. And I think that we've certainly made a lot of progress in a lot of these different areas, so that's the end of my discussion. I do plan on having a couple of amendments here when we get to that stage.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thank you. This one was, kind of a tough one for me. Trying to balance private property rights with public safety. The private owners should have the right to enjoy their animal on their property, but at the same time, the public has a right to use public property without being accosted. So I think we're going to strike a balance with this amendment, hopefully. And also, Mr. Cathy, we've had 0 chicken attacks in Casper since we've passed that ordinance. And bees. So that's all I have.
Other comments, discussion? Yeah, I'll just comment. We have had those concerns. People, what if my dog just gets out of the yard because there's a hole in the fence or whatever? And I think, again, as before, I think that our animal control officers are capable of making judgment calls about these things. And what's going to get people in trouble isn't a single incident or two. It's going to be a pattern of disregard and a pattern of poor training of the animal. And that's what I'm sure the court will be looking at before anyone were actually convicted using this ordinance, so, or cited in this ordinance, so. Other discussion? Now we get into the amendments. Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two amendments. I will read the amendment in the cryptic version where it's line and section, and then as an overall, so that people have an understanding of how it reads. My first amendment, I would move to amend paragraph 7B1 subsection B on page 2, line 64, inserting the phrase, "and not under the direct supervision of the owner," or after the word property, and deleting the word "and," which before this proposed amendment followed the word property. Everybody got that? Here's what it would sound like. A non-vicious, non-dangerous animal is deemed at large if it is on the owner's property and not under the direct supervision of the owner, or not confined to the extent that the animal cannot leave the boundaries of the property. Examples of confinement are by use of fencing or other secure enclosures or by tethering. The second amendment is what's going to address a lot of people's concern. Is it appropriate to read those both at the same time?
What would you advise, Mr. Henley? Should we do them in tandem?
If they want to understand the ordinance, I think you can do that, but then just vote on them separately.
So let's explain the second ordinance, but just vote on the first, okay? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move to add additional definition to the ordinance with the subsequent definitions being numbered. The additional definition numbered 18, starting at line 111, shall read, "Direct supervision, as used in this definition of at-large above, means the owner of the animal is in the same area as the animal and not separated by any barrier. The owner must be able to immediately see and effectively call and manage the animal." So the intent is that you can go out in the yard and play ball with your dog. You can be out gardening with your dog, and it doesn't have to be tethered, but you have to be directly in supervision of it. It doesn't count if you let it out and look at it through the window. Responsible pet ownership, certainly go out and engage with your animal. If it leaves private property, it's still subject to being at large. So those two taken in conjunction, I think, have to be understood. So it may be in the front yard with you with it, without a leash.
Okay, so to be in compliance, if you want to go inside for a cup of coffee, bring your dog with you.
That's correct.
I'd second Councilman Walsh's motions.
Okay, moved by amendment offered by the First Amendment only by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Huber. Discussion. Anyone?
Mr. Mayor, I would just offer this. I know we've all gotten a lot of emails on this subject, and I know that there are people that have very strong opinions one way and the other about what their private property rights are and those kind of things. I've talked to an awful lot of people who have really told horror stories about walking down the street and seeing a dog in a front yard, and the dog runs out into the street and gets run over. The dog runs out to the sidewalk and jumps up and knocks people down. Dog runs out and jumps up on people, doesn't knock them down. Dog runs out, jumps up, bites people. Dog runs out and attacks other dogs. I know that everybody sits there and thinks, oh, my dog wouldn't do that and I can control my dog. I'm skeptical about that, but I think that the language that Councilman Walsh is offering here, might strike a reasonable balance there. I've had quite a few people tell me that, no, all dogs, like Mr. Steensland said, if the dog's outside, it needs to be tethered, fenced, or whatever. But I think that this proposed language will, try to strike a balance here. Both sides are not ever going to always be happy, but I think this might be a good balance.
Okay, other comments? And I think we just need to emphasize that definition of direct supervision. It doesn't mean that you're looking at your dog through a window. It means you're out there with the dog. And hopefully that gives some degree of safety that wouldn't be present in a lot of these situations where people have been attacked. Are we all set? Okay, please cast your vote on Amendment 1. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion to amend passes.
Okay. And could you read your second amendment then, Councilman Walsh?
Mr. Mayor, second amendment, I'll read it in whole since we have the written one, so it makes a little better sense. Adding the definition that describes direct supervision. As direct supervision is used in the definition of at-large above, means the owner of the animal is in the same area as the animal and not separated by any barrier. The owner must be able to immediately see and effectively call and manage the animal.
Okay. Second?
Second.
I think Councilman Friel beat you to the punch. Seconded by Councilman Friel. Discussion on the amendment. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, second amendment passes.
Thank you, and thank you all for your work on this.
Your Honor, I think we need to vote on the amendment.
I'm sorry, we didn't vote on the ordinance itself. Please cast your vote on the amendment, or on the ordinance itself.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
We still have one more reading, folks, so you get a chance to look at it in its new language and come back in 2 weeks and tell us how well we did.
Or didn't.
Or didn't. Okay, moving on. The chair would entertain a motion to table the second reading of the ordinance amending Chapter 508 alcoholic beverages until the February 19th, 2019 council meeting to allow council to discuss the matter at the February 12th, 2019 work session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Friel. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
At this time, just a slight departure from our usual, please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 12A1, a resolution approving Casper bus route changes. Item 12A2, a resolution authorizing the execution of an M54 utility license with the Wyoming Department of Transportation for the installation of a low-pressure sanitary sewer service line. Item 12A3, a resolution authorizing a transportation alternatives program agreement with the Wyoming Department of Transportation for the Murad Park to Walmart Trail. Item 12A4, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with Civil Engineering Professionals, Inc. for engineering services for the North Beverly Street Improvements Project. Item 12A5, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with CH2M Hill Engineers, Inc. for engineering services for the Sam H. Hobbs Wastewater Treatment Plant Secondary Treatment Rehabilitation Project. Item 12A6, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 to the agreement with ITC Electrical and Technologies for a time extension and price reduction for the wastewater treatment facility emergency generator project. Item 12A7, a resolution authorizing amendment number 1 to the contract for professional services with Arcadis US Inc. for additional compensation for engineering services for the wastewater treatment facility emergency generator project. Item 8, a resolution declaring certain city-owned property as surplus and authorizing the sale of same to the highest bidder. And item 12A9, a resolution authorizing the declaration of certain city-owned property as surplus property and authorizing sale of same to the Downtown Development Authority of Casper.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any abstention, or excuse me. Mr. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of these or explain any of these to the general public and council?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a couple items of note. The clerk read the item pertaining to bus route changes and so forth. This is in concert with regard to the proposals that council heard for the last several weeks. And variations to those proposals really are not significant or material, but rather very consistent with what we heard from the public and with regard to the direction you gave. Another thing that I thought might be helpful for you to understand, or the public to understand as well, is with regard to the installation of the sewer line. Council would note that that line is indeed in the urban growth boundary of the town of Mills. The reason that is moving forward is because, A, the town of Mills does not have the sewer system available to tag into. Otherwise, the city of Casper would not be involved. And indeed, this is a construction of a private lateral, if you will, to serve a private growth project. So in my opinion, it's a real good partnership that exists in statute to allow these kinds of things to happen, and with regard to the agreement that we have with our partner community. Beyond that, those items are what I wanted to make mention, and I appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote.
I do.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm going to say nay to the Casper bus route changes. Most of it I agree with, but as I mentioned in our last work session, there are aspects I don't agree with, so I'm going to say nay to that one.
Any other abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote. Oh, I pushed
I
it.
assumed. With all members voting aye on most of the items and the nay vote by Councilmember Bates noted, motion passes.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 13A1, approving the purchase of 52 ballistic vest carriers and accessories and an additional 52 ballistic external vest carriers without accessories from Gall's Safety and Survival Gear. Item 13A2, the appointment of Planning and Zoning Commissioners to the Old Yellowstone District Advisory Committee. And item 13A3, authorizing additional appointments to the council's boards and commissions.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Huber, seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Let's start with Councilman Hopkins. You've been gone,
Mayor, thank you.
but things are good in Hawaii.
Reasonably warm.
Okay. Councilman Walsh.
We had our monthly CNFR meeting, and we can anticipate between 375 and 400 athletes attending, being participants in the CNFR this year. And, you know, that'll just be based on qualifications, but that'll be the number range we're looking at, and with all their associated family and friends. So as that comes up in June, we'll make sure that everybody has all the details on that and can make themselves available if they'd wish.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lutz.
Not tonight, thank you.
Councilman Bates.
Thank you. I don't have any real relevant concerns or anything. I do want to say thank you to all the people who have emailed me at least about the dog ordinance, the liquor ordinance, and anything else. Those who watch on the YouTube or TV, thank you for watching and paying attention. I know today was the president's address, so I know a lot of people probably tuned into that as well. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Okay. Councilman Pacheco.
Just a couple comments, and I'll be brief. I know one of the hard parts about doing any legislation is that not everybody is going to agree. And I think a big part of that is that coming to an understanding of what is best and how we can work together to accomplish a common goal. And I think that's something that we can continue to learn as we work through ordinances that can be a little bit tense for some people. But I hope that with some pragmatism and common sense, we can create legislation that is good for a community.
Thank you. Councilman Hubert.
No comments tonight, thank you.
Councilman Friel.
Nothing tonight.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Nothing.
I can report that I went down to Cheyenne this past Friday to try to persuade the Corporations Committee to move the bill that would allow us to create a stormwater utility forward, and failed miserably. That did not get through committee and is now dead. And was also prepared to provide testimony on the benefits of the city possibly joining the state insurance pool. Unfortunately, that bill failed in the Senate, And so, once that happens, apparently the House won't even consider it, so that will also not go through this year. But great to spend some time with city staff, despite the outcome. And we all need to, again, stay as involved as possible in the goings-on down there because they all affect us. So, the next meeting of the Casper City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, February 12th, 2019 in the council's meeting room, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, February 19th, 2019 in the council chambers. A notice of an executive session to take place at this date and during this meeting was given. We have a matter to discuss, 2 land items and donations. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session and at the conclusion of the executive session to reconvene this regular meeting solely for the purpose of adjournment of the regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Huber. Please. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn into an executive session having moved and seconded, and that majority requiring a 2/3 vote majority of the council present, please cast your vote. Please record the vote. It didn't go through again, huh? Okay. Okay.
Thank you. With all voting
Got it.
aye, motion passes.
Got a glitchy button. Okay. A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of this motion. We are hereby adjourned to an executive session. That's new language. I hadn't read that through, or it's been a while. So, thank you.